first decided that I wanted to get into sign language interpreting back when I was in high school. And at the time I was taking some ASL classes and I was learning more about deaf population and deaf culture and sign language. And as I was learning about those things, I realized that I had some pretty big misconceptions about all three of those things. And I realized that if I'm having these misconceptions as someone who's actively trying to learn about them, then a lot of other people are probably holding these misconceptions also. And I think as the church, if we're really trying to reach deaf people and do what we can to show them the love of Christ, then it's important that we acknowledge these misconceptions and learn and kind of change our perspective about certain things so we're best equipped to reach them and communicate with them. One of the biggest misconceptions that there is about sign language is that sign language is universal, that I could go anywhere and have a conversation with any deaf person, and unfortunately that's not really true. So ASL is really only used here in America and in parts of Canada. It's not really used anywhere else. Even though, like in Britain, they also speak English, they have their own sign language. So, like for example, in ASL, this is the letter A, and in the sign language they use in Britain, this is the letter A. So, like pointing to their thumb, something totally different. And it's more than just even the signs vary, but it can also be the structure, like the sentence structure and different things like that can vary. For another example, even though Guatemala and Mexico, they both speak Spanish, right? Those countries each have their own individual sign language also. They're not interchangeable. So I think that's really important to know and to understand. Something else that's really important is the fact that sign language is its full own language. It meets the 5 language parameter requirements. It has its own sentence structure. It has everything that you need to be a language. It's not just a lot of gesturing. It's its full own language. And on that note also, it's not just like we're pairing a English word with a sign. So there's not necessarily a sign equivalent for every English word, just like there's not an English word equivalent for every single sign that we have. And even like on top of that, the sentence structure of ASL is very different from the sentence structure that we use in English. They're 2 totally different things. So it's important to understand that it's not just like, oh, I'm sitting here and I'm saying this sentence to you in English and I could just easily like just match a sign that goes with it. It's not as simple as that. It has its own separate like sentence structure. And again, not every English word has its own sign. So those are just some really important things to note. And later on in this video, I'm going to teach you a few signs that you could use if you are interacting with deaf people and just want to introduce yourself or have a like short conversation. It's important to know too that just like, especially here in America, we have a lot of regional accents, right? Versus like a Midwest accent versus a Southern accent, and even those can vary depending on where you grew up, right? The same thing is true in sign language. So depending on where you grew up, your signing style might be faster or slower. You might use certain signs for things that they don't use in another area of the country. So I first started learning sign language in Michigan, and then I went to school in Virginia, and now I work in North Carolina. So I have kind of a weird smattering of signs of where I've learned different things. So if the signs I'm teaching you later on in this video, someone is like, yeah, we don't use that here, I have no idea what you're talking about, that's totally possible because, again, it varies a lot by region. There are things that I learned in Michigan that when I took it to Virginia, they were like, we have no idea what you're saying, and vice versa. So an example of a sign that varies a lot by region is pizza. So you can sign it pizza, 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 and there's a lot more. But that's just a little bit of an example to show you the variety that there can be. So now I'm going to go ahead and teach you a few signs. I'm going to teach you how you would introduce yourself. Originally, I was going to show the whole signed alphabet, but I think it's probably best if you really want to take the time to learn how to sign your name. There are tons of resources online that have either pictures of the alphabet signed or videos of the alphabet signed. I think putting it in the middle of this video would be tricky to actually help you like totally learn it, but I'm going to teach you some other signs that are just good like conversation starters, and that you can be connected to the church and sharing the gospel more. So if you're going up to someone and you want to introduce yourself, typically we'll sign hi like this, or you can wave, that's fine too, but a little bit more that's like signed language in deaf culture is hi, and you say my, so it's just like a flat palm, my, and then name. You just put your two fingers together, name, and tap them like twice, my name, and then typically we don't sign is, it doesn't really have a good ASL equivalent, so it's just my name, and then you would sign your name, so that's my name, Madison. So it's just hi, my name. And then typically afterwards you would say, it's nice to meet you, right? So nice to meet you is flat palm, nice. You kind of put them like perpendicular to each other, nice. This is meet, so two pointer fingers, meet you. So there's just a real like easy way to introduce yourself to someone who's deaf. You could even, if you don't want to like take the time to name, just say like, hi, it's nice to meet you. And I know that they would really appreciate that. Some other just like basic beginner signs, please, sorry. So please is a flat hand and sorry is with like a fist. Sorry, thank you from your chin, thank you. Again, just some basic beginner signs to get you started, and then these are ones that are more connected to things that we might do in the church and sharing the gospel. So just in general, the sign for church is, this is letter C in sign language, and you bounce it up and down on the back of your other hand, church. Christ is also the letter C, so you start at like your opposite shoulder and bring it down. You can't see my opposite hip down there. The sign for Lord is the same motion. Lord. Jesus is, you use your middle fingers and you go back and forth, kind of like referencing the holes that were in his hand. So Jesus. If you want to sign Bible, that's Jesus, book, Bible. This is a sign for love. If you want to talk about the cross at all, you kind of make what the cross looks like with, again, kind of the C hand shape. So you go down, you go over to show the beams of the cross. Jesus loves you. If you're talking about, we say a lot that he like died for us. He took our place. So this is how I would say like he took our place. So you kind of start with your one hand farther away and the other closer, and then you switch their spots. So literally like switching place. This is a sign for dead. So you start this hand palm up, this hand palm down, dead. The sign for alive is to like this and up, alive. If you want to say like he rose again or is alive again, you do this and then again. So I know that was kind of a lot of signs that I just threw at you there. And obviously you can back this up and watch it again if you want to take the time to really learn those or know those. But I think really it's best in a lot of situations that if you're really trying to have a conversation with them, it's important that you either have someone there with you that knows sign language, like an interpreter, or just someone who knows sign language, but preferably an interpreter who's there and that's like their job to not only bridge the languages, but also bridge the different cultures that you have going on there. Because I can teach you signs all day, just like I could learn random Spanish words all day, but I think it's really important that you have someone who's fully knowledgeable and can really understand those different things and put all of it together in a way that's going to make sense to them as far as sentence structure and grammar and all that goes. So if you ever do come across a situation though where you're with a deaf person and you're trying to communicate with them or something, I'm just going to say deaf people are very generous and very understanding, and a lot of times they're just so thankful that you're making an effort to communicate with them that they're really going to appreciate that, and they're not going to look down at you if you only know how to sign like, hi, nice to meet you. They're not going to look down on that. They're still going to appreciate that you took the time and effort to learn that and came over and talked to them. And I think it's just how we are with anyone who's learning our native language, right? We're trying to encourage them and support them and do what we can to help them further their knowledge, and it's the same for them. So one way that you can communicate with them is, even though this might sound silly, but just writing stuff, like getting pen and paper and writing stuff down and passing notes back and forth. It's better than nothing. And I think also along the lines of this is something that a lot of hearing people assume, is that deaf people are able to read lips, and that all deaf people can read lips, and that makes it easier for them to communicate, but that's not necessarily true. Some deaf people can read lips, but not everyone can, and lip reading is not an exact science. So maybe even if they can read lips, it doesn't necessarily mean there's not going to be misunderstandings or miscommunications, because again, it's not an exact science. It's really not the most effective way to communicate. On the lines with that is that also deaf people can vary a lot. And what I mean by that is some deaf people have hearing aids, others have cochlear implants. Some deaf people do speak for themselves. Some deaf people don't have hearing aids or cochlear implants. They sign only. It really just depends on the deaf person and their preferences. And like I said, it varies a lot person to person on what they prefer. And I think it's important too, as hearing people, I keep saying hearing people, but that's how we differentiate a lot. But as for us to understand that just because a deaf person comes up and maybe they have a hearing aid or cochlear implant to assist them in communication, and maybe they do talk for themselves, it doesn't necessarily mean that at like a church service or something that they wouldn't want an interpreter. And so if they come and they do request an interpreter, as a church, it's kind of our responsibility to provide that for them, especially here in America under different laws and stuff that exist. It's really a church's responsibility to take care of that for them. And so sometimes I know that interpreters can be an extra expense, and not all churches can afford that, but there are some agencies and interpreters who are willing to do like pro bono work for churches and help make that less of a burden for the church if it's something that they really can't afford. But back to what I was originally saying though, is that it's important for us to understand the deaf people and to take into consideration what they prefer and what's best for them. So just because they're able to sit like over here with someone and one-on-one have a conversation with them and be fine, that doesn't necessarily mean that they feel as comfortable with English in a situation like a church service or something, as that can be really overwhelming. I mean, you have to understand that for most deaf people, really like all deaf people, English is their second language. So they're most comfortable with and are going to prefer most of the time ASL. So if we have the means and the opportunity to give that to them, if that's what they want, then as a church, we should be supportive of that and making sure that they have that for them. I hope this has really helped and that you feel like you know a lot more about deaf culture and deaf people and just sign language in general. And when I was first asked about this opportunity, I was honestly just so encouraged that this is something that people are taking the time to learn about. So when I first decided that I wanted to do ASL in high school, part of the reason for that was because my mom and I were doing all this research about sign language and what different jobs you could do with it. And my mom stumbled across this website that said the deaf people are the third largest population that need to hear and know the gospel. And that was really what cemented for me that this is the field that I wanted to get into, because so many people, they just don't know. It takes kind of a specific skill set to really reach deaf people, and a lot of times they just are kind of minimalized, and not really, the effort is really not put in for them. And so I was so encouraged to just know that people are really actively promoting this, I guess, and wanting to learn about this and wanting to learn about deaf people and do what they can to reach them. So that has really encouraged me. And I just encourage you guys as you go out and do this to really just be courageous and really just go out of your comfort zone and do what you can to communicate with them, because they're really going to appreciate it. And a lot of them really, they don't know the gospel, and so they're hungry for it even if they don't know it. So I wish you guys all the best of luck.